CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Juliette Mann. Our top stories. The Oxford-AstraZeneca jab may reduce the spread of COVID. The first time a vaccine has been shown to reduce transmission.
Our other headlines: can the former boss of the European Central Bank, Mario Draghi, bring a stable government to Italy?
The chief executive of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, steps down, but scrutiny of big tech's monopoly isn't going away.
And the pandemic poses problems for athletes as they prepare for next year's Beijing Winter Olympics. The Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine may have a substantial effect on transmission of coronavirus. That's according to a new study. This is the first time research has demonstrated that a vaccine can cut transmission.
Just hours after the UK government trumpeted their success came the news that Switzerland has declined to approve the vaccine. Well, our correspondent Nicole Johnson's in Maidstone, Kent, in the south-east of England, where door-to-door testing has been taking place. Nicole, let's start with Switzerland first. That's the Swiss taking a cautious approach to approving this drug. Does this give us an insight into why things are moving so slowly across the EU?
Yes, well, first of all, the thing to point out is that the Swiss are saying that they need more time. They're effectively waiting for the clinical trial results that are underway in North and South America. People might remember that the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine decided to expand their trial because they simply didn't have enough infection in the UK during the summer. So Switzerland is saying that it wants to get that data, it wants to see greater efficacy before it approves it. So we don't know at this stage whether they will or they won't. But in terms of the European-wide approach, the European Medicines Authority did approve it last week, but from country to country we're seeing different outcomes. It's become quite controversial. Germany has said at this stage it won't be vaccinating people with the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine over the age of 65. It says that it also wants to see more data, and we've also seen concerns raised in France, in Italy, in Poland, all of those countries either deciding that they won't vaccinate those over 65 or either expressing concern about that vaccine.
Well, it's a waiting game, but let's get back to that study from the United Kingdom. The UK government really is hailing its praises, saying it's great news. How significant really is it?
Well, at this stage, that study hasn't been formally published, so we don't have a great deal of information. But as you said, it is the first time that we have heard a study say that a vaccine reduces transmission, because that's been the big question with these vaccines. Will they reduce transmission? If they do, it means that a country like the UK could potentially get out of this pandemic much faster. Because as long as we don't know whether a vaccine does reduce transmission, people will still have to be very careful whether they're vaccinated or not. Now, the other piece of information to come out of the study was that the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine has 76% protection for 3 months, which we already knew, with the first dose, and that the protection increases the longer you take to deliver that second dose. And that will give some credence to the somewhat controversial British approach, which has been to delay the second dose so that they can vaccinate as many people as possible with the first dose at least.
And meanwhile, everyone's digging into these new variants and potential variants. That's why we've sent you to Maidstone in Kent in south-east England, a so-called hotspot. What's been going on?
Well, all morning we've been seeing the police, fire brigade officers and volunteers going across these neighbourhoods door to door to drop off testing kits and then to return an hour later and pick them up. There's also been testing, drive-through testing carried out here. It's a massive effort across 8 different postcode areas in the UK, here in the southeast, Kent, Surrey, parts of London. It may even be extended to parts of Bristol and Liverpool. All of this is aimed at tracking down the South African variant. The UK has found 11 cases of this variant that have turned up as part of community transmission. So they haven't been brought into the country by somebody travelling. It's just been somebody who has found out that they have the South African variant at home. That has raised all sorts of concern about how far it could be spreading in the community. So it's launched this surge testing, told people in these neighbourhoods to stay indoors. So it really is a ghost town around here. Everyone is indoors and waiting to get these tests and waiting to get their results back. And the British government is clearly hoping that if they can get it under control here, they won't end up with another situation similar to what they had with the Kent variant, which is now responsible for 80% of transmissions across the country.
Nicole Johnston, thank you very much for the update.
Chancellor Angela Merkel has renewed her promise that most of Germany will be vaccinated by the end of the summer. But many are sceptical as the country nears the beginning of a 2-month period when doses will be in short supply. Ryan Thompson reports now from Frankfurt.
Germany's federal government has fed out a barrage of bad news in recent weeks. Most of it is in regards to a slow and stubborn vaccine rollout. The Chancellor Angela Merkel went on national television to provide some clarity about where things stand. She defended her government's handling of the vaccine rollout, and more importantly, she provided some key dates for the country's progress. 10 million people will be vaccinated by the end of March, she promised, and every adult-age resident will be so by the end of the summer. She's stressing patience and says that EU delays also come from a rigorous approval process that has not changed its criteria even amid a brutal pandemic. The Chancellor also joined her health minister in suggesting that the EU should explore using the Russian Sputnik V vaccine, which revealed promising new results in trial data published on Tuesday. She says she spoke recently with the Russian President Vladimir Putin about the vaccine, which could arrive with 100 million doses for Europe in the early summer. Now, Germany is coming to the end of its lockdown in just under 2 weeks' time, and state premiers will meet with the federal government next week to decide what to do next. But the Chancellor, Angela Merkel, does not seem inclined to lift restrictions anytime soon, and during her TV appearance last night warned that the government should not move so fast. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
Italy continues to battle with the pandemic as well as an economic and political crisis. In a bid for stability, President Sergio Mattarella has called on former European Central Bank chief Mario Draghi for help. Alex Fraser reports.
After days of talks, Italy's President Sergio Mattarella called time on negotiations. By Tuesday evening, talks between potential coalition partners had broken down. An agreement couldn't be found for a coalition led by Giuseppe Conte, the Prime Minister of Italy, until last week. The President announced that Italy needed a high-profile cabinet. He said that the risk of an election during a time of national emergency would leave Italy without a fully functioning government. On Wednesday at noon in Rome, Mario Draghi, the former head of the European Central Bank, went to the presidential palace. He was given a mandate to attempt to form a new government of national unity as the next Prime Minister of Italy.
È un momento difficile. Il Presidente ha ricordato la drammatica.
It is a difficult moment. The President has spoken about the dramatic health crisis and its grave effects on the lives of people, on the economy, on society. The seriousness of the emergency demands answers that are up to the task. It is with this hope and this dedication that I have accepted the President's appeal.
Ed è con questa speranza e con questo impegno.
The thinking behind this appointment is all about the European Recovery Fund. That was the issue that brought down the coalition headed by Conte. Draghi is a trusted financial figure with an international reputation. It's widely acknowledged that he played a major part in stabilising the European single currency during the Eurozone crisis. Italy's shrinking economy needs the almost $250 billion of grants and loans from the EU's Pandemic Recovery Fund. The appointment of a new government, though, is not a sure thing. Draghi is expected to receive confidence from former government partner, the Democratic Party, Matteo Renzi's Italia Viva and Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia. However, Five Star, the party with the most seats in both of Italy's chambers, have already said they will not back Draghi's appointment. The major right-wing parties say that ideally the population should decide who governs in an election. Lawmakers from either of these factions would have to be talked round to enable Draghi to lead the new government. There will have to be a confidence vote in the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate. If there is no majority at that point, a national election would be called. Alex Fraser, CGTN, Italy.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Russia's vaccine performs well in international tests and will now play its part in global inoculation.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to the Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Don't forget you can sign up to our daily newsletter. We bring you all the top business headlines straight to your inbox. So sign up for free at this address. CGTN. See the difference.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Experts from the World Health Organization have visited a virus research laboratory in China as they study the origins of COVID-19. The Wuhan Institute of Virology has been at the center of conspiracy theories that claim a leak from a laboratory caused the coronavirus outbreak. Scientists from around the world have repeatedly rejected that. The WHO team has visited hospitals, a disease control center, and a seafood market. A member of the team says valuable information has been provided.
We're relying on our foreign counterparts, our Chinese counterparts, to do the background work and to share that information with us. So there's a lot of trust building that has to go on, and there's a lot of understanding of what the goals are and that it's going to be confidential and that we're not going to somehow, leak information. So that's working. I mean, they are sharing data with us that we've not seen before, that no one's seen before. They are talking with us openly about every possible pathway. So I think we're really getting some. I think any member of the team would say that.
China says it will donate 10 million doses of its COVID vaccines to the global distribution program COVAX. Now, COVAX aims to provide 3 billion vaccine doses to developing countries, financed by richer nations. The rollout is due to begin this month. The Chinese companies Sinovac, Sinopharm and CanSino have volunteered doses. COVAX has released an interim plan of how it will ensure poorer countries around the world will have fair access to vaccines. The scheme has allocated at least 330 million doses for participating countries in the first half of the year. India has reported more than 10.8 million confirmed cases of the virus. That's the world's second highest tally after the US, and it will receive the highest number of doses, more than 97 million. Well, our correspondent Tony Waterman is in Brussels. Hello there, Tony. Now, this distribution plan, it comes months, though, after many developed nations have already started their own vaccination campaigns, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're right. The U.S., the U.K. and the EU have started their vaccination programs late last year, and there have been concerns that have been escalating ever since that there is this growing gulf between the rich nations and the poor nations when it comes to immunization. A lot of these first world countries, they struck 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 contracts with pharmaceuticals and have really snapped up the bulk of that initial vaccine supply. So there are concerns about getting those out before the rich nations really take a big lead here. Now, those 336 million doses that COVAX announced today, those are going to start being distributed, if things go according to plan, sometime this month. But there are a number of things that need to take place before then. Most importantly, perhaps, is that the WHO needs to approve AstraZeneca for emergency use. It is going to be providing the bulk of these vaccines, and it has not done that yet. So we're going to see 1.2 million doses coming from Pfizer-BioNTech, which is going to create challenges for a lot of these low-income nations that have poor infrastructure, perhaps electricity problems. And of course, that vaccine needs to be kept at a very, very low temperature. So even while these poor nations will start to receive these vaccines, the rollout looks to still be incredibly slow.
The rollout slow, you say, if things go according to plan, the big question mark, questions about whether these vaccines are approved, but also concerns about new variants. How concerned are COVAX about those?
Well, I think that it's playing on COVAX's mind just the way it is playing on everyone else's mind, especially when we've seen that at least some of the trial data coming out from these vaccines that have yet to hit the market, Johnson & Johnson, Novavax, they're less effective when it comes to certain strains of the new variant. But the COVAX facility individuals saying today that they're more concerned about just getting these vaccines, which are approved, out to these nations, because even if they're less effective, they're still going to be offering some sort of protection. Then it also brings in these poor nations into the distribution cycle as these pharmaceuticals start to tweak their vaccines to make them more effective against these new variants. So their concern right now is just to bring these poor nations, 147 of them, which are part of the program, really bring them up to speed and put them on a level playing field with the richer nations.
Tony Waterman in Brussels, thanks for the update.
Well, another vaccine has joined the international fight against coronavirus. That's the analysis of a team of international scientists reviewing Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. Moscow says the jab can be used to inoculate 700 million people this year. Well, the scientists say the jab is 92% effective in fighting coronavirus. That's according to peer-reviewed research published in the Lancet Medical Journal. Nicaragua is the latest country to approve the vaccine. 16 countries have approved it so far. That includes Hungary, which is the first EU country to give the green light. It's priced at just under $10 a dose. That's more expensive than the AstraZeneca vaccine, but significantly cheaper than the Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna vaccines. Well, let's talk now to our special guest, Kirill Dmitriev, CEO of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, who financed Sputnik V's research and development. Good to see you. Welcome to the program. First of all, how significant is it that the publication of Sputnik's phase 3 trial results have now come out into the international community?
Well, I do think it's very important, and we got major support not only from the Lancet, but also from many scientists, including scientists from the US, Europe, China, who commented very positively on the vaccine. And it's very important that not only vaccine is more than 90% effective against COVID, 100% effective against severe cases, but also, as you mentioned, it is very affordable, and it can also be stored at +2, +8 temperature versus -70 centigrade required for some other vaccines. So it really hits a mark, and we call it humankind vaccine, on being safe, efficient, affordable, and easy to distribute. And we appreciate that the world saw it, the data confirmed it, and actually 19 countries, not 16, because we get registrations every day, already registered this vaccine, including Mexico, as well registered Sputnik today.
Prior to this international seal of approval, I wonder how you thought the rest of the world viewed Russia's COVID vaccine development and trials.
Well, I think the world was divided in two. So majority of the world was very positive, but of course we had some criticism from the US, from Europe, from Britain, and lots of disbelief in the Russian vaccine. But, what was good for us is that most of the countries viewed Russian vaccine very positively. We saw 75% brand recognition of Sputnik, and Sputnik listed as one of the first 2 top vaccines in most of the countries. But we definitely feel vindicated versus position of some of the people in US, UK, and Europe with the Lancet article, because it did show that we are one of the 3 most efficient vaccines in the world, And by the way, we will work very closely with AstraZeneca and with other vaccines to help increase their efficacy. So Russia is really a partner, and we approach it in a very positive manner, despite some of the media attacks that we have seen before. By the way, media attacks not only against Russian vaccines, but also against Chinese vaccines, basically against any non-Western vaccines.
I don't know if you managed to hear our coverage earlier on in the programme. We were reporting on some of the EU countries' stuttering supply problems with vaccination. I want to ask you in particular about your confidence that the Sputnik jab can be produced and exported in huge volume, because this is what the world needs.
Well, yes, and we heard the coverage, of course, and you mentioned the figure of 700 million people that we expect to vaccinate by the end of the year. And indeed, we have some good facilities for production in Russia, and we're adding, increasing them, and there will be new factories coming online in the next couple of weeks that we will announce. But we also built major partnerships to produce vaccine in China, Brazil, Korea, India, and we are sharing our technology with those producers to produce it internationally. So definitely this production question is a big one. We are happy to supply vaccine to Europe starting from May, and we mentioned that starting from May we could supply up to 50 million people doses in basically Q2, Q3 of this year. So we are happy to work with Europe. We applied for EMA approval. Hungary already approved. Some other European countries are talking to us directly, and we will definitely be a contributor to fighting the pandemic. But we're not trying to say that we are the main vaccine or the only vaccine. We can just play a role, but all of the other vaccines are very important, and we cherish the success of China in vaccine development and other nations as well.
Can you explain in simple terms to someone who's a rather dim journalist and not medically trained how using one shot of both the AstraZeneca jab and Sputnik together could trigger a better immune response?
Sure, I'll try, and basically this is at the core of Sputnik. So we use two different components for two different shots, and the logic is that after you inject the first component, the body starts attacking it, so next time you inject the same component, it's less efficient because of the immunity being built to this component. So when you change a component, you basically trick a body system to not attack the delivery mechanism, and then the second shot becomes much more effective. And Sputnik is the only vaccine in the world that currently uses two components for different shots. And basically using AstraZeneca shot and Sputnik shot will solve the problems that AstraZeneca sometimes has with the second shot being a little bit less effective because of the immunity to the first shot.
Kirill Dmitriev, thank you very much for your time. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
The first doses of the Sputnik V vaccine have arrived in Hungary, making the country the first in the EU to use the Russian vaccine. Hungary has moved away from Brussels' centralised procurement to speed up its own vaccination programme. Mia Alberti reports.
40,000 doses of the Sputnik V vaccine have arrived in Hungary. This is the first batch of a total of 2 million doses that are expected to arrive in the coming months. In Hungary, almost 250,000 people have already been vaccinated, and the government hopes to start using the Russian vaccine as soon as possible, making Hungary the first country in the EU to do so, but probably not the last, officials say.
Brussels' centralized vaccine procurement has failed, risking the lives of Europeans. So we had to look for new sources of supply. We were the first, but we will probably not be the only ones in the European Union to do so, as we see statements from officials urging the study of the Russian and Chinese vaccines in Western Europe.
In fact, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has defended that the Sputnik V could be used in the EU if it's approved, and officials from France and the Czech Republic have also said that they don't oppose using, quote, any efficient vaccine. Now, the approval of the Russian and the Chinese vaccines here in Hungary has received some criticism. Most recently, the Chamber of Doctors saying there is a lack of documentation of their effectiveness. However, Just recently, there was a leading international medical journal that published the late results of the Sputnik V trials, showing that the vaccine is safe and almost 92% effective against the coronavirus. Some very good news that could bring the Russian vaccine one step closer to being approved and used in the rest of the European Union. Mia Alberti, CGTN in Budapest.
More than 500,000 Serbians have received a COVID jab in a population of under 7 million people. Serbia has the highest vaccination rate in continental Europe. CGTN's Alyosha Milenkovic reports now from Belgrade.
Thousands of people are coming every day here to the Belgrade Fair to receive their jab against the COVID-19. That vaccination is voluntary in Serbia, and all these people want it. During the application process, they also choose which vaccine they'd like to have. And in this Belgrade Fair hall are those who opted for a Pfizer jab. The mass vaccination process has been in full swing for over a month. And among the first to receive their jabs were medical workers.
I received the Pfizer vaccine because I'm a medical worker and it was the first one available. I didn't have any side effects and I think it is okay. But every vaccine is fine and we all need to receive a vaccine.
Besides the range of vaccines available, Serbia is following the guidelines issued by manufacturers on administering the doses. This means in Serbia, the second dose is given 3 weeks after the first. Some EU countries, as well as the UK, have decided to delay administering the second dose by a few weeks to ensure the highest possible coverage with the first dose. Regardless of being Europe's vaccination success story, Serbia continues its struggle to acquire more and different vaccines worldwide. The Serbian Prime Minister Ana Brnabić announced on Monday the purchase of an additional 6.5 million doses. Serbia is also working on the beginning of the localized production of the Russian Sputnik V vaccine. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Belgrade.
Meanwhile, a scheme to help people suffering from the effects of long COVID is being piloted by the English National Opera, along with the London Health Trust. It's thought that breathing techniques used by opera singers to improve their performance can also help patients' recovery and reduce their anxiety. More at europe.cgtn.com. The Spanish bank Santander has posted its first ever annual loss, more than $10 billion. The banking sector is being hit by a double whammy of the pandemic downturn and record low interest rates. Santander, which owns the largest retail bank in the Eurozone, also blamed the cost of restructuring. Ryanair adverts that encouraged people to buy flights and suggested customers could jab and go have been banned by British regulators, who called the adverts irresponsible and misleading. The adverts received the third highest number of complaints on record. Ryanair said it disagreed with the ruling but has withdrawn the adverts. Two of China's biggest tech companies are going to court. TikTok owner ByteDance is suing Tencent. It claims users of its video sharing app Douyin, which is only available in China, were blocked from accessing content on messaging service WeChat and QQ. Now, both are owned by Tencent and have close to 2 billion monthly users. ByteDance is asking the court for around $14 million compensation.
Now, the world's richest man has decided he no longer needs to go to work. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos will step down as chief executive of the business he started in his garage 30 years ago. In a letter to staff, he said the move will give him time and energy for his other adventures. Mr. Bezos has amassed a fortune of almost $200 billion, according to the Forbes list of billionaires. Let's talk to our correspondent Jim Spellman in the United States. Jim, was this a surprise, and what ventures might he go on to next?
Well, I think this was a surprise to many people. In fact, the announcement was buried in some corporate filings that he will step down as CEO in the third quarter. He will stay on, though, as executive chairman, so he'll still be kicking around the company he started back in 1994 as an online bookseller. It's now basically an everything store. Their popular Prime delivery service now includes groceries here in the U.S., streaming original video content, as well as smart devices that have many of us talking to Alexa throughout our homes all day. This will give him time for other ventures, and he specifically mentioned two in an email to staff. One, the Washington Post, which he purchased a few years ago, so we could see him focusing the Washington Post to expand into other media realms. The second is his Blue Origin aerospace company that focuses on space travel, so he could be giving Elon Musk and SpaceX a little more competition in that sector. He also has two nonprofits, one called the Day One Fund. It deals with homelessness, early childhood education, and hunger. The second called the Bezos Earth Fund, which focuses on environmental issues. So we could see a dual track here with Bezos focusing on these new commercial ventures while trying to create something of a legacy as a humanitarian, similar to what Bill Gates has done. He certainly has the money to fund those sort of initiatives, Jamie.
Tell us about his replacement. Who's the new man?
Well, his name is Andy Jassy. He currently runs the Amazon Web Services part of the company. They handle cloud computing, back-end, internet structures for so many companies. And even though this is not as prominent as those prime boxes many of us see on our doorsteps, it accounts for about half of Amazon's income. So it's a very successful part of the company. He's been a trusted lieutenant of Bezos since all the way back in 1997. So we can expect some degree of continuity as he takes over the reins, Jamie.
New face at the top, okay, but the old problems remain, don't they, around the world, whether it's the EU, the UK, China, the United States. Big tech is under fire for its monopoly position.
And we can only expect to see that pressure increase on the big players like Amazon. Antitrust charges in Europe, potentially major reforms to the way big tech operates in the U.S. We expect to see Congress take up new regulations, and as well as just facing straight-up competition for online retailing here in the U.S. from companies like Walmart. Streaming services are popping up, as well as Netflix. You also have legacy media companies like NBC trying to come up with competition for Amazon Prime online, and internationally, companies like Alibaba have a huge part of this sector around the world. So they'll face a lot of challenges going forward. That said, I think if I was coming on as a CEO, Amazon would be the kind of company I'd like to take over, Jamie.
Jim Spellman in the United States, thank you very much.
So Amazon without Bezos, unthinkable? I've been talking to equity analyst Sophie Lund-Yates.
You know, Jeff Bezos is a huge part. He is the Amazon story, really. But the main thing to highlight here is it's a mistake to think that this is some kind of early retirement or that he's going to be disappearing off into the woodwork. You know, looking at that letter that he sent to employees, there's loads of energy still there, and he is still going to be having quite a lot of strategic oversight, I reckon, in that role as executive chairman.
Let's look at the economy, because Amazon's been at the heart of the digital surge that we've seen through the pandemic. That said, times are still tricky. So what challenges will the new boss face?
So you're absolutely right. Amazon has been a huge beneficiary of the pandemic. You know, we're physically locked out of physical shops, which has pushed us down virtual shopping aisles, as it were. So the biggest challenge, really, while we view this as a long-term growth prospect, really, this huge surge in online shopping is probably here to stay. It makes comparisons a lot more difficult. So as we start looking into next quarter and the quarters after that, you know, growth is going to temper a little bit. It's going to look slower simply because the pandemic tailwind will start to unwind as vaccination rollouts continue.
And can we expect perhaps a shift away from e-commerce with the big focus on the cloud, or will it be even Stevens?
For now, it's really important to remember that Amazon is very much still a retail operation. The web service arm is incredibly profitable, really, compared to the retail part of the business. By that, we mean each extra cloud sale makes a lot more profit on a per sale basis. So growing that part of the business is absolutely going to be something that the new CEO is going to want to do. But for now, retail is very much still the main headline. So no major change there immediately.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the UK and the EU begin post-Brexit talks on resolving trade tensions between Britain and Northern Ireland.
Patient after patient after patient. They take a long time to get better. They're the sickest patients we've ever seen.
It's a race against time, because we can all see the threat that our NHS faces, the pressure it's under.
We're dealing with something we knew very little about.
Europe's first two epicentres in February have received their first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
Another day, another grim milestone for the UK in its fight against COVID-19. 100,000 people have now lost their lives after contracting the virus.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas. Nothing can stop an idea whose time has come, and this idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Oh, no! We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and me, Juliette Mann. Our top stories. The Oxford-AstraZeneca jab may reduce the spread of COVID. The first time a vaccine has been shown to reduce transmission.
Our other headlines, the former boss of the European Central Bank, Mario Draghi, is called in to bring a stable government to Italy.
And the chief executive of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, steps down. But scrutiny of big tech's monopoly isn't going away.
The UK has asked the EU for an extension of the grace period on checks on trade moving between Northern Ireland and Britain to soften the impact of Brexit on the province. Ireland is also urging flexibility, but has warned that removal of the Northern Ireland Protocol agreed in the Brexit negotiations is not going to happen. Our correspondent Naweed Jabarkal has been following the story. Naweed, the UK government, along with the leaders of Northern Ireland, expected to hold a video conference with the European Commission Vice President. Any indication of exactly is going to be discussed?
Yeah, Jamie, we're expecting that meeting to get underway very shortly at 5 p.m. GMT. And in terms of the tensions between the two sides rising recently, particularly around the EU's decision to try and control the supply of COVID-19 vaccines into Northern Ireland, a move that didn't go down too well here in London, nor in Belfast with the Northern Irish government, or indeed with the EU member state Ireland, who called it a mistake. But you can't help feel that this story and this latest spat is a lot more fundamental than that. It goes back to the Brexit agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol, a concession by London essentially to allow Northern Ireland to remain in the EU's customs union. Now that's let the tensions between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland across that key border dissipate a bit, but what it's essentially done is cut Northern Ireland off from the rest of the UK. So things like food going across from supermarkets from the rest of the UK now have a lot more checks, and what it's leading to is turning out to be a big political headache, not just for Boris Johnson here, but for the EU as well.
People in Northern Ireland were told that Brexit wouldn't cause major disruption, but just days after the UK ended its transition period with the bloc, scenes like this highlighting the difficulty with the divorce. Checks on goods at 2 ports here have now been suspended after threats were made against staff.
We have asked them not to attend their duties today, and we will continue to monitor the situation and adapt accordingly.
At the heart of the matter is the Northern Ireland Protocol. It's an insurance policy that meant after Brexit, the region stays in the EU single market for goods. As a result, there are now new checks on items coming into Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. That's angered local politicians here, who want the new trade barriers to be scrapped.
I can tell her that we will work to ensure that there are no such borders. We will respect the peace process and indeed no barriers down the Irish Sea, and that the principle of unfettered access across all parts of our United Kingdom is upheld.
In a bid to calm tensions, British officials are meeting with local leaders and EU counterparts and have suggested relaxing checks at the border on key items like food until 2023. Watching on is EU member state Ireland, whose foreign minister called on all sides to diffuse tensions. And barely a month after Britain's total exit from the EU, this is a crisis that could have far-reaching consequences, not just for Europe, but for the future of a united kingdom.
Louise, what's the Irish government been saying about these latest developments?
Well, Dublin plays a crucial role here, Jamie. Simon Coveney, the Irish Foreign Minister, calling for both sides to diffuse tensions, also urging the EU to show flexibility in how it approaches this as well. As for Michael Gove, the UK Cabinet Office Secretary leading the negotiations, set to take part in that meeting, he's calling for current relaxation of rules which are set to expire in April. So food going over to Northern Ireland, for example, supermarkets don't have as rigorous checks. That'll end in April. A copy of the letter that we've seen suggests that that should be pushed to 2023, and what we're hearing from Dublin is that there is some support for that to be essentially put in place. So remember, Ireland plays a key role here, not just in terms of how it deals with its neighbour to the north, but also in terms of pressuring the EU. And just lastly, Northern Ireland, the smallest party geographically in this equation, it's also saying that it's going to dig its heels in, and unless the government here in London starts to show more support for a united kingdom, essentially treating Belfast like it does Scotland and Wales, that it's going to dig its heels in. And that could be a real key issue for Boris Johnson, particularly when you consider that Scottish independence, reports of Scottish independence, support for that is rising. The last thing he's going to need in Westminster is further calls for independence elsewhere in the kingdom.
Nawid Jabarkal in London, thank you very much.
Myanmar's elected leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, has been charged by police following the military takeover. The charges relate to possession of illegal walkie-talkies and breaching import and export laws. She was arrested on Monday and could face 2 years in prison. The military accused her party, the National League for Democracy, of election fraud and seized power on Monday. As political instability grows, it's bringing fear and anxiety to the country, as Dusita Salkau explains.
On the surface, it all seems normal. People in Yangon going about their daily lives, buying food from the markets, cars on the streets. But beneath this facade of normality, anger is boiling. Banging on pots and pans, concealed by darkness in the safety of their own homes, the seeds of a movement have been sown. Medical professionals from 70 hospitals have gone on strike. Their fingers barely dry from the ink as they overwhelmingly voted for Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party in Myanmar's second truly contested election held late last year. They were hoping to continue on their bumpy road to democracy. But the past few days, it's been a screeching U-turn, speeding back to full military rule.
It was my worst nightmare unfolding right before my eyes. The atmosphere in Naypyidaw is eerily calm, as if we're awaiting the arrival of an imminent storm. General sentiment of the people would be fear, anxiety, and uncertainty around what comes next.
For all the celebration of Myanmar's transition to democracy after half a century of military rule, in reality, the power of the military barely diminished under a constitution that preserves the military's control over the government by retaining a quarter of all parliamentary seats. The relationship between the military and Aung San Suu Kyi was therefore never smooth, but it was perhaps a marriage of necessity as she walked a tightrope as the civilian government's de facto leader. With her whereabouts still yet to be confirmed, she now faces charges for illegally importing communications equipment. Ousted President Win Myint also faces charges for offences under the disaster management law.
To take power is one thing, but keeping the power is something else. This time, I think the Tatmadaw is going to face a society-wide civil society uprising. It could lead to an upheaval with a lot of turmoil and turbulence because, this is a different kind of Myanmar they're taking over.
The Myanmar today faces a frightening scenario, an economy in freefall battered by the effects of the global pandemic, decades of internal armed conflicts, widespread poverty, and now a renewed threat of widespread civil unrest. Lucita Saogao, CGTN.
The highest United Nations Court for International Disputes between states has ruled that it does have jurisdiction to hear a case brought by Iran challenging US sanctions. They were reimposed by Donald Trump after he withdrew the United States from the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. Tehran says by doing that, Washington breached a 1955 friendship treaty between the two countries. The US says the Hague-based ICJ does not have jurisdiction and wanted the case thrown out. The EU's top court has ruled that Hungary has systemically breached legal limits on air pollution from particulate matter in some regions for as long as 12 years. The judgment from the Court of Justice puts Hungary on a list of 9 EU countries found guilty of illegal air pollution since 2011. Particulate matter is produced by industry and vehicle emissions and is associated with respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. Eliminating bad policy, the words of President Joe Biden as he signed 3 more executive orders aimed at undoing Donald Trump's immigration program. A task force has been created that will reunite families separated at the border as part of President Trump's zero-tolerance strategy. This is another of his executive orders, number 28 in his first month, too shy of the record. The son of former President Trump has hit out at lawmakers in Scotland who are debating whether his father's business interests should be investigated. Eric Trump says they should be focused on saving lives rather than pursuing what he described as personal agendas. The Scottish Green Party says there are serious concerns about how Mr. Trump financed his Scottish golf courses. Tributes have been pouring in from around the world for Captain Sir Tom Moore, who captured the hearts of millions of people during the pandemic. The 100-year-old raised almost $45 million for the National Health Service charities by walking 100 laps of his garden during Britain's first national lockdown. The Army veteran died after testing positive for COVID-19. A minute's silence was held earlier in the UK, and the government says it plans to mark his memory appropriately.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesperson says the actions of riot police on Tuesday were justified due to what he called the aggressive behaviour of provocateurs. Well, over 1,000 protesters were arrested in Moscow after opposition figure Alexei Navalny was imprisoned. He was found guilty of breaking a suspended jail sentence after travelling to Germany to receive treatment for Novichok poisoning, an assassination attempt he says was ordered by the Russian leader. Stuart Smith reports.
Protesters could be seen scrambling away from riot police who used baton strikes and tasers to disperse crowds that had gathered in Moscow's city centre. Protesting without permission is illegal, and people coming out to recent rallies have faced the prospect of fines and arrest. The Kremlin calls those attending provocateurs and hooligans.
Yesterday there were calls for an unauthorised action. The police reacted to it quite decisively. The reaction of the police was due to the threats that could arise during such an action.
International reaction to Navalny's sentence and the treatment of protesters has been scathing. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called the ruling pure cowardice, and his Foreign Minister Dominic Raab is calling for the release of Navalny, protesters and journalists who have been detained over the past 2 weeks. The United States says it is deeply concerned and is also calling for the release of Navalny and protesters. The European Union is sending its foreign minister to Russia on Thursday, and it's expected that he will discuss these issues with his Russian counterpart. Stuart Smith, CGTN, Moscow.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, preparing in a pandemic, how Olympic athletes in Spain have kept in shape ahead of next year's Winter Olympics in Beijing.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world. All around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. With China preparing to celebrate the Spring Festival, Premier Li Keqiang has been speaking to the China-UK business community. He delivered a hopeful Lunar New Year's message whilst acknowledging an extraordinarily challenging year for the world and for China-UK ties. He said he hoped the year of the ox would herald a reset. CGTN's Paul Barber reports.
It's been 68 years since a group of British businesses went to China to break the ice, a trip that paved the way for an historic trade mission of what became the 48 Group Club. Premier Li Keqiang addressed its annual Icebreaker Chinese New Year event, held online for the first time, a striking reminder of the year a pandemic changed all our lives.
The year 2020 was an extraordinary one for China, the UK and the whole world. The international community battled the COVID-19 pandemic in solidarity and partnership and fought to protect the life, health and safety of the people and promote world economic recovery and growth.
The event is being held on an important date on the solar calendar, Li Chun, which marks the official start of spring, a time to sow seeds for crops that will be harvested later in the year. The symbolism of that is lost on no one, as these traders, politicians and diplomats hope the year of the ox will see the benefits of bilateral ties being reaped.
We're all human beings together with the same aspirations for our families and our friends and our countries. And let, as the Premier said, us pool our efforts to build a better world together.
Developments in Hong Kong and debates over Chinese companies' involvement in UK telecoms put relations between China and Britain under strain in 2020. But participants highlighted just how close trade ties have remained throughout a year dominated by the pandemic.
In this context, exchanges and cooperation between China and the UK were inevitably affected. However, thanks to the concerted efforts of the Chinese and British business communities, cooperation continued to grow.
China is now the third largest market for British exporters. We've had a massive growth of Chinese investment in the UK by a factor of 20, big projects like Hinkley Point now going ahead. China has deepened its relations with the City of London, with the Chinese currency sovereign bonds.
With the green shoots of spring come hopes that 2021 and the year of the ox will bring fresh opportunities for a world in recovery mode. Paul Barber, CGTN, London.
The Beijing Winter Olympics is a year away. Preparations are going smoothly despite the pandemic. All competition venues in the Chinese capital are now complete. The International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach has high hopes for the Games.
China was giving a great example on the one hand, successfully fighting against the virus, and on the other hand, realizing that sport and the Olympic Games are a part of the solution for the recovery from the pandemic. So there I expressed my appreciation and gratefulness to President Xi, and also our great satisfaction with the state of preparations, because again, despite of the pandemic, all the venues are ready 1 year before. I think that's a great example of Chinese dynamism, determination and efficiency, what we are admiring so much.
Athletes all over the world are training ahead of the event due to start on February the 4th next year. But preparations have been severely affected by the pandemic. CGTN's Rahul Pathak reports from Madrid, where he's been meeting Spanish athletes ahead of the Games.
Well, it's difficult to describe because you need to feel it. It's amazing. So you have like an explosion of adrenaline inside of your body, but you need to be calm and decide every moment what you need to do and see where you want to go.
Y estamos aquí en Innsbruck, en la zona de llegada.
You may not have heard of him outside Spain, but skeleton racer or slider Ander Mirabel could justifiably be described as an Olympic legend. A veteran of 3 Olympics, next February he'll be in Beijing competing in his 4th Winter Games. An incredible achievement for a man who almost single-handedly introduced Spain to the sport, which sees competitors hurl themselves down a steep and treacherous ice track, reaching speeds of up to 130 kilometres per hour. And if Beijing 2022 is to be the 38-year-old's final Winter Olympics, competing in the first ever Winter Games to be hosted by a city that already held a Summer Olympics would be the perfect send-off, if a little bittersweet for the man from Barcelona.
Well, I think this is one of the dreams, because Barcelona is fighting for Winter Olympic Games in 2030, and I'm a little bit jealous that China will be one of the first to have this opportunity, no? But it's really nice that the Olympic Games go back and give the opportunity again to give the opportunity to have all these amazing sports in China. And for me, it's completely two different worlds. Summer sports is one thing, winter sports is another one. Also, the type of athletes that you can find in the summer and the winter are completely different.
Now, Spain has traditionally not enjoyed much success at the Winter Olympics in the past. Just 4 medals won since 1936, their first appearance, testament to that. Spaniards have traditionally been drawn to the Summer Games, where they've won a total of 154 medals. But thanks to the passion of people like Ander, attitudes are changing. But for the last 12 months, there's been one issue that has overshadowed preparations for athletes everywhere.
Our athletes are training hard. We have athletes in Russia, we have athletes in Canada, we have athletes in Italy, and we have athletes here in Spain, which move around Europe as best as possible due to the pandemic to get ready and compete at international events where they will qualify for the Olympics.
All eyes will be on the Summer Olympics in Tokyo later this year to see if a huge multinational sporting event can take place in a post-COVID world. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
Now, it may be nearly the year of the ox, but it was 10 baby pandas stealing the limelight in China's Sichuan province, making their public debut just in time for the Lunar New Year. The China Conservation and Research Centre's class of 2020 enjoyed the traditional red envelopes stuffed with snacks. The cubs are 6 months old and weigh about 10 kilograms in 4 years' time, and after an awful lot of bamboo, they will become gentle giants weighing in at 150 kilograms. 44 panda cubs born in 2020, half of them born at this centre in Sichuan. Very cute. That's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, or search for CGTN in your app store, and follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, on Facebook and on Instagram.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.